Hi, this is Pamela Worth with the Encourage Your Wellness podcast. And today I'm so excited. It's fun to have a couple of people with us. We have Dr. Jeremy Ayres, and he is co-author of the Red Pill Revolution, passionately uncovering deception in the medical industrial complex and its links to pharma and food industries, holding titles like Senior Practitioner of Physical Medicine and Naturopathic Consultant. He merges chiropractic, osteopathy, and naturopathy, trained in the UK. International Natural Health Educator, guides numerous individuals towards natural healing. And his mission involves blending Eastern wisdom with Western science, challenging medical manipulation, and advocating for holistic well-being to create a healthier world. So welcome. And then we also have John Gusty. John, you've got an incredible journey as well. Over 30 years in the entertainment industry, working behind the curtain for some of music's biggest names, and then turned your attention to health and wellness in an effort to help your wife heal from what was originally diagnosed as multiple sclerosis. Soon realizing the same deceit and profit motive that plagued the entertainment media was even worse inside the medical industrial complex. So thank you both so much for being here, and would love to, talk about your health and wellness journeys and, all the things, prescriptions, prevention, food, health literacy, mind, body, spirit, electromagnetic, all the things that kind of come into this and what we need to know for optimal health and wellness.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us both. And Jeremy's over in the UK, so Jeremy, extra special thanks to you for staying up late tonight to do this. So,
happy to be here.
I think where our hearts are, we're all about conversation. We're all about sharing knowledge and learning our way forward. And there are just some things in life that we've all been programmed and manipulated to believe that can't be talked about or questioned or it just to be accepted at face value. There's all sorts of examples of that. I don't mean to ruffle any feathers. I'm just giving examples. It's like you bring up the Holocaust, and there are things you can't talk about, on certain topics like that. Just using it as an example. Don't want to get into the Holocaust or anything. But one of those things, there are these series of events that happened in 2020. You may have noticed some things happened, and during that time, it became more obvious to me. And I come from the I've come from the music industry where, you're supposed to, it's art. So really everything's on the table. Right. And, just these events happened and you watched how no one could question. No one was allowed to question. You really, regardless of what side you're on, what your opinion is of anything, I think every single person listening to this or watching this knows or felt in some way during those events, there were certain things that couldn't be questioned, couldn't be talked about. And that just, I don't know. I've found, and I know Jeremy agrees with this because we've bonded so much over this. But it's usually if you wanna find out where there's a honey pot of knowledge and stuff to be had, just look at the things you can't talk about. And there's usually a good reason why, and there's usually a lot of truth when you start digging into those honeypots, and so that's really how the Red Pill Revolution book came about, and it's just taken a good general look at the world, the wacky playing field that we're all on right now, and how to navigate that without getting caught up in anger or frustration, because all of that stuff leads to dis-ease, and got to be healthy up here to be healthy everywhere else, and so and vice versa, and so that's kind of where that's where I'm coming from. Jeremy, did I represent you?
Yeah, no, it's great because John, we came from two extreme different perspectives, because John was in the music industry and I was in medicine, albeit commonly called alternative medicine, but when I was 12 years old, cancer came into my family for the first time. My brother's wife's mother, who went on to pass from it, although now I would suggest it was from the treatment rather than the disease. But as a 12-year-old boy, in a very simplistic, innocent way, and seeing all the anger and all the upset and all the worry and all that sort of thing that comes into those families when these terrible things come along, I was just like, well, this has got to be fixed. And that's really where it began for me, Pamela. And I didn't think much of it for quite a few years until I was in my early 20s, when I was an international canoeist representing Great Britain, when I hurt my back very badly, and I'd never liked doctors. I just didn't like going to doctors. I didn't know why. I just didn't like them. And I went to an osteopath, which is, similar to a chiropractor, in case people don't know. And cut a long story short, my pain went away, and I thought this was magic, and I wanted to get into it. So I started training into osteopathy, and once I eventually passed as an osteopath, it just rekindled my interest that I just wanted to heal cancer. I mean, it all came back to me, and I thought stupidly at the time there must be a degree course or something out there that does this. And of course, as I can see you grinning, Pamela, because like you, many of the great people that have discovered things aren't doctors or scientists. They're ordinary folk where dis-ease came along into their family. But as I think you'll appreciate, as I started to research, which I've never stopped doing for the last 30 years, the more I research, the more it makes you more isolated. And you realize that actually when you get closer to how to heal people, or at least how to ask the right questions of how to heal people, it actually doesn't make you more popular. It makes you more isolated, even professionally. And so you end up in this sort of arena where, talking to ordinary folk, they're like, well, how come my doctor doesn't know this? Or why aren't you on TV talking about this? And that's what ultimately, and it's a very brief version of our story, got us to write the Red Pill Revolution, because we literally have to talk to people why we're not on the TV talking about this, and doctors like us and others like us, because it's very suppressed. Because at best, it's a profit-driven, sick industry. It's certainly not a healthcare industry. And I'm sure you've experienced this when your child was unwell.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about when someone's coming to you and wanting guidance and support in their health and wellness journey. What do you find is kind of your first go-to and questions you like to ask? And because that kind of then becomes your protocol, if you will, right?
Oh, absolutely. Excuse me. Let's drink some water here. Excuse me. I think, I was taught by two very good people. And I think the most important thing I was taught by Barbara, a great naturopath, was how to take a case history. And she taught some very strong philosophy. And I think philosophy is very important. And the basic philosophy is that your body just doesn't know how to work against you. It's just not made that way. And that can sound quite weird to people who have been sick or known people who have been sick, but it just isn't made that way. And so by taking a case history, we can see how since they were born, and often before they were born, actually, they've gone along and collected toxicity. And it's not just chemicals and heavy metals and what have you. It can often be trauma and behavioral traits and what have you. So you take a case history and you see how it sort of accumulated in the body. And then at different times, the body had attempts to get rid of it, which we would call detoxification. But a doctor would probably want to label it with some kind of diagnosed labeled disease and then start treating it. And either you're helping the body to release it, or you're helping it to be suppressed and it gets pushed deeper and into a more serious state of disease. And so for me, teaching and taking a case history, how you got sick, the many causes of what's caused your body to start functioning in a way that is not good, is really the key to then giving that back to the patient or the client, and then they'll understand more easily why you're suggesting they start making changes or doing certain protocols. Because let's face it, most people don't want to change. And that's why allopathic medicine, which is, of course, symptom-based treatment of medicine, is so popular, because you don't have to take responsibility. You don't have to consider that maybe you're doing things wrong, or maybe you've been poisoned. You just want to take something and feel better. But that's really, for me, the core of it. And that's what makes it so special and so powerful.
So what are some of the questions that you'd like to start with? And, kind of leaning into your toxin comment, that it sadly is a huge part of why we end up getting sick and have symptoms, is because our bodies are just overloaded. What are some of your favorite questions and things that you like to help people detoxify?
Oh goodness, where do you want to go with that? I think strangely enough, it really starts with the concept of you're not sick, you're toxic, which is one of the major seeds I want to teach people. And again, that their body doesn't know how to work against them. And so once they, for example, my wife of 14 years, she was terminally ill with breast cancer when I met her, and she'd had all the surgery and all the radiation, and all the chemotherapy, and that's actually when the first time she started to feel ill, and that she was going to lose her life. And when I took her case history, we found several things, more than I'm going to talk about. But one of them was she had amalgam fillings, which you and your listeners probably know has a large element of mercury and copper in it. And all these fillings leak, even though the American Dental Association will say they don't, but they do. And it's a very, very toxic heavy metal that they're breathing into their lungs. The other thing we discovered was she was using underarm deodorants, like many people, for 20, 30 years. And where do you think these chemicals go? They go in the armpit and straight into the breast. She was also drinking at the time Coke Zero, because like many people, they'd been educated that sugar's bad for you, and they're definitely on the right track there, but they'd gone to completely the wrong, they should have gone to water really, but they went to, Diet Coke or aspartame sweetened Coke. And that was a major contribution as well. And then there was levels of trauma. So once you start to discover the different causes, and you literally put the pieces of jigsaw together for them to see the picture of why they're ill, because usually, as you probably appreciate, people come to you and they say, I have, with a label. Well, they haven't. Natalie didn't have breast cancer. She had mercury poisoning, chemical poisons from the deodorants, chemical poisoning from the Coke Zero, and a lot of trauma and many other things. And so when you present it like that, all of a sudden, from the fear of the disease they've been told they have, they start to see, oh, I can do something about that. And then we introduce them to protocols and detox protocols and so on and so forth. But that's the key for me.
So, what are some of the misconceptions you think between allopathic, functional integrative health?
Can I take that one?
You go, John.
Yeah. All right. So first and foremost, let's make sure, I'm sure your listeners do, but let's make sure that people understand what the allopathic system, which is what I would refer to as the medical industrial complex, that's an ideology. You might even argue that it's close to a religion. Okay, because it thinks about the body and the way the body works in a particular way. It's theoretical. It's not factual. So just taking an allopathic approach is by definition, you're already looking at things in a very, very specific, boxed in sort of way. The opposite of allopathic, which would do, and I would argue there's not a lot of room for creativity or individuality in the allopathic approach to things. It's very cut and dry. If you notice the next time you're in a doctor's office or whatever, you'll see anymore. Everyone, the nurses or the doctors have tablets, and they're going through it. They're putting things into a template. And they're if this, then that. They're not, I don't want to insult everyone in the profession, but they're not using natural human diagnostic skills like a mechanic, like an auto mechanic would use. An auto mechanic is going to start with the basics. They're going to look at the vital fluids, the oil, the gas, the water, the brake fluid, the transmission fluid. You can tell a lot from what's going on with those fluids. Well, why doesn't every medical professional have a microscope on their desk? And I think a lot of people would be stunned to find out. And I've actually gotten, I've never been in a fist fight, but I've come really close. And it was because of this particular conversation, because we learned something very, very significant about my wife years ago. And it was something that should have been spotted early on. And I asked the doctor, I was like, this is like elementary level stuff. Why don't you have a microscope on your desk. Why are we talking about this years later? And come to find out, it's actually illegal to do live blood analysis, and is a fascinating subject. It is illegal in the United States for a doctor, the patient, and the patient's blood to all be in the same room together with the doctor giving any sort of diagnosis based off of just that alone should blow people's minds. But there's people sitting in federal prison right now for having the audacity to do what I just said. There's at least a dozen people in the U.S. alone that are imprisoned for that very crime of doing actual diagnostic practices. And so, we just don't, we in mass, and I think the events of 2020 should have woken a lot of people up to this. We need to start holding that industry as accountable as we hold any other industry. I mean, when people's cable TV goes out, they lose their minds, and they're on the phone to Comcast going, the game's on, or when their phones stop working, they get on the phone to AT&T and they lose their mind. We need to hold the medical industrial complex to the same passionate set of standards that we hold other industries to. And again, as I said earlier, it seems to me in mass, and 2020 illustrated it perfectly, that it's questioning the medical industrial complex or any of their workers. I've had doctors get mad at me for just asking questions. I mean, I actually visibly mad. One in particular was shaking that I had the audacity, and I wasn't being a jerk. I wasn't being pompous or anything. I was simply asking questions. This is about the most precious topic to me that it could be, is about my wife. And I was asking good, honest, investigative questions that anybody who was watching their loved one go through something would ask. You probably asked very similar questions when you were having the situation with your child.
Very well, and with my mom. So my mom is almost 6 years with 90 days to live, stage 4 cancer diagnosis, and so very, very well known national medical authority refused to order a PET scan for her. But said that it was in her brain and blood by now. It was metastasized. And I said, well, where's the proof? And again, they got kind of mad at me. So then I found a doctor that would allow us to pay cash to get a PET scan. And then lo and behold, it wasn't all over. So you really, really have to fight to get those results. And similarly, kind of what you were back to with the microscope. So we, with her cancer, she had gotten to a point where she had done 18 chemotherapies, multiple radiations, couple surgeries. And they said, and she felt like she was going to die. She felt so sick. And they said, it's time to plan. And she's like, God, there's got to be another way. And I said, well, I've got friends that have told me about Mexico. Do you want to go there? And she's like, yeah, sure. Let's do it. So sure enough, we went down there and all of her tumors are either gone or much smaller, and her cancer numbers cut in half, and she's doing great. Has never felt better, doing her own, dinners and lunches with friends and shopping and the whole 9 yards and traveling. But that doctor that we went to,
I will say real quick before I lose this, Mexico, some of the best, because I've been all over trying to get my answers for my wife. Mexico, some of the best medical treatment I've ever witnessed with my own eyes has been in Mexico. And it's because they're allowed creativity and individuality without the threat of being thrown in a cage for having the audacity to be creative or an individual.
And it's mind-blowing to me because it was incredibly good care. And the doctor's offices and the clinics and the hospitals, very clean, beautiful campuses. I mean, I'm blown away. But they have microscopes on their desk. And so when we did our intake appointments, I don't like having my finger pricked, but he did. And then he put it under the microscope and he's like, well, you're dehydrated and, it looks like you may have a fungal infection. And I was like, I have a what? And he's like, we're going to treat you with an ozone treatment and you're going to be fine. I was like, okay. And then he did hers and he's like, oh yeah. And I see this and I see this, and we're going to take care of that and help you detox properly. Anyways, it's mind blowing because there is so much that you can see with a live blood test right on the spot. So
that should be the very first step Whenever anybody encounters a medical professional and they're trying to figure out a problem, they should be looking at the blood, they should be looking at the saliva, they should be looking at the urine, they should be looking at the stools. I mean, those are you can tell an awful lot of what is right and what is wrong. And I don't know, and I know I'm thinking like an auto mechanic, but I don't know how you could move forward without having looked at at least those four very basic starters. At least just look there, and that will inform what you may or may not do next. And that is not how people get treated here in the U.S. or many other places as well.
Yeah. So that was part of my frustration with my son was, it took me a half a dozen doctors to find one that was willing to do lab testing to find out what was really going on. Because you can't, it's no different than when you're running a company or something else. There's always a trigger that starts the problem. So what happened? Let's work backwards and figure out how to fix it, right? Now, the problem at the time was that lab testing was crazy expensive. I had to sell a car to have enough cash to pay for it. Thankfully, now it's not as expensive, and you can get basically everything you need for, 10, 20% of what it costs, 10, 20 years ago. Now, the challenge still lies, though, in finding a practitioner that is willing to listen and help you find those lab tests. Where do you suggest people learn about options available to them for health and wellness, and how to find practitioners that can help you get to the why?
Jeremy, why don't you answer that from a global perspective? Because I can give you the Tennessee U.S. perspective, but I think you've got a better global perspective.
Yeah, I think the conversation's excellent because I think where I want to come at it is what most people's experiences, yours and John's, and certainly every client that I've ever taken a consultation with, pretty much has been a negative experience within medicine, whether it be in the UK or Canada or the States or wherever. And there seems to be a common theme running through that, where you're not allowed to ask questions, and there's a very God complex frequently. And I think we have to look at the history of where it's come from, so people can start to understand, why that industry has gone the way it is. And as you probably know, it originated from the Rockefeller Foundation, or the Carnegie Foundation, which is really Rockefeller medicine, where they needed to start doing more with their oil, and petroleum-based medicines were born. And essentially, a new industry was launched, the allopathic medicine industry, with a business model to take over the world and make it the only legal protected medicine. And that's what they've done. They've destroyed all the other philosophies pretty much, and they've made it the only legally protected and sort of number one medical place to go. And unfortunately, what that has fostered is a great deal of arrogance, but it's also suppressed all this wonderful knowledge. And there's many doctors and nurses that I know, many of them, that would have loved to have explored and brought in more diagnostics, but the environment that's been set up is that if they do, they'll lose their license and lose their status and lose their income. And so very quickly, the really good doctors and nurses that want to forge ahead find themselves in a very trapped in environment. And if anybody sort of doubts that and falls for the sales pitch that we're living longer and healthier than ever before, I think you only have to ask anybody in the last 50 years in any country, are we sicker or healthier? And I think everybody knows, and this is pre-COVID, or I call it convid because we can talk about that maybe later, but pre-COVID, or the PCR data scam that went on to create a fake pandemic. But pre that, we've become sicker and sicker and sicker. And I think everybody knows this. And if modern medicine has benefited from a business model, and so off the back of that, and particularly through the COVID era, where I think it became very obvious that doctors in the system were suppressed about talking, and certainly the doctors outside the system, it seems to me, certainly by the amount of people writing to us, that a sort of revolution of interest has now begun. And so the networking around the world, and I'm not surprised you said Mexico. There's just some wonderful, I'm not sure which clinic you went to, the Hoxley or Gerson, or which one you may have gone to, because there's so many good ones. But there seems to be a revolution of interest in non-allopathic medicine. And so people are talking, and that's all John and I about. They're talking, they're having conversations, they're getting on YouTube, although most of the great stuff, I mean, I've been constantly banned on YouTube, so most of the great stuff still gets banned, but there's Rumble and there's Facebook's being, and things are being shared. And that's why we started a memberships site for that very reason, where people can come in a safe place. And I don't mean that in the safe space bubble, but in a place where you're not going to kicked out for asking the wrong question or having a different opinion from us. So I just think we're in a very positive time. Your podcast, many, many more like you. They're getting more and more views and more interest. And this is what's happening. There's a revolution of consciousness change in asking better questions. And from that, we get better answers. And I think I hope you'll agree, because I've seen raw vegans heal themselves from cancer. I've seen carnivores heal themselves from cancer. I've seen every kind of, I've seen people that didn't change their diet heal themselves from cancer. If it was just diet, although I think we should all agree that there's true food and there's processed feed, but if it was just diet, we'd all give the same diet and go off and get well. It's not. It's artificial light exposure as a toxicity. It's natural light. It is trauma held in the body. It is dental problems. It's so many factors that can be the tipping point between someone getting sick and conversely someone getting ill. But I think it's such an exciting time for the revolution of what I like to call true medicine, and let's rock on with it.
So where do people find doctors, integrative and functional doctors, that are able to help them get to the bottom of what's going on? Where do you look?
Well, I tell you, I don't go looking for doctors. In fact, I try to stay away from doctors, but I go looking for information or answers to things. And so I find myself talking to doctors and medical professionals a lot, because they're out there in, you can find them. And so I've found that when I am talking to a medical professional, I will do two things. I will first of all, I'll ask and this is a great screening question if anyone wants to steal this pro tip. Ask them what they think about the terrain theory, versus germ theory. Just ask them. They don't have to declare anything. Just ask them. And if they don't even know what the terrain theory is, I would probably seek answers or consultation elsewhere, because that means that they're all in on the medical industrial complex template, which is you're either going to burn them, drug them, or cut them. And there's usually other answers. You don't always have to be drugged, cut, or burned through radiation or chemo.
Right. So what does terrain mean to you? What does it mean for anybody that's listening that may or may not really understand what that is?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
About terrain theory.
So there's, just like with any other ideology, there's more than one possibility. I mean, you look at like religions. There's different religions, and they believe different things. There's different political parties, and they believe different things. Well, there's different theories as to how the body works. There is the germ theory, which is what allopathic modern medicine is anchored in, and then there's terrain theory. And terrain theory is, I know Jeremy's got one of the best, most, like, he's got a great way to explain the difference. But it is basically, Jeremy, you think using the fish tank analogy is the way to go? You want to?
It's the simplest way to show a relatively complex theory, but absolutely go for it.
So if something was wrong with the fish tank, do you like if you saw the fish and there was something wrong with the fish, would you consider at all the terrain, the water that the fish is swimming in, the light that is shining on the water, the other things in the water, and I think the obvious answer would be, of course you would. Of course you would. But the germ theory is the exact opposite way of thinking. The germ theory would say there's something wrong inside that fish, and something artificial, man-made, likely is going to need to be the answer to that problem.
Well, I'll jump on that if you don't mind, and hopefully clean up a little bit. But if the fish tank was visibly dirty, and the oxygen levels had been turned down, and the fish were getting ill with all different kinds of named diseases, I always say, what medicine would you give the fish? And most people will go, well, what are you talking about? You'd clean up the water first of all. You'd get the oxygen level. You'd test the pH, and then probably the fish would recover. And then if they didn't, maybe you'd intervene. And the fish tank represents your body and your fluids, and the fish are your cells. And so the terrain theory, which has now been proven as far as I'm concerned, because they videoed these sort of things now. And one of the best books is the Gaston Neeson book. I can't remember the title off the top of my head now, but the Gaston Neeson book. Oh, that's it. The Trial of Gaston Neeson, because he actually took the terrain and germ theory to court in Canada and won, but they didn't publish that, But essentially, they've, their origins were Pasteur, who was a real plagiarist actually, and Beauchamp, who wasn't well known but very studious. And Beauchamp showed that the germ, very simplified, was nothing, and the terrain was everything. And as the terrain, meaning how dirty the fluids that surround the cells changed, so did the germs. They multiplied. They actually morphed into different things. And when you clean that up, they reversed actually back. Sort of the reverse of the Incredible Hulk. They could go up and down, should we say? Whereas Beauchamp wasn't quite studious and was more interested in making himself more famous and well known and look after his career. He said the germ is everything. Kill the germ, and that's it. And that's what launched allopathic and the chemists into a world of, well, if we kill everything, eventually you'll be well. But that hasn't worked out that way.
That was Pasteur that said that. You said Beauchamp.
Did I? Yeah, Pasteur said the germ is everything. So it's really the opposite philosophies. And certainly after 30 years of cleaning up people's bodies with all kind of labels of bacterial and viral and parasites, we just see incredible things come out of them, but also incredible changes in their blood. And this is why John and I love live blood analysis, because it's a real picture of how dirty, people's, well, in this case, their plasma and things is.
But I think, your question was, how do you find the right people who might be, working in the right mindset and the right modalities to actually get the problem solved? I think that's a great screening question. And again, it's non-confrontational, because you can in just by watching the way that they answer that question, you can tell what team they're on. Let's put it that way. You can tell what team they're on, and if they're gonna, and you can choose accordingly. But I have found when you ask questions like that, you're going to get one of two types of medical professional. You're going to get the medical professional that's, good team player, and they're going to give you the by the book answer. And no offense to those people, they serve a purpose, and you'll get that. But the magic is you'll get people who are probably more like us, and they'll look around nervously and they'll go, so into the terrain theory, and those are the people.
No, I think it's super to go ahead and find people that are willing to take a look at more than one thing to help them on this. So it's been great to have you guys on. How do people find out more about you?
naturallybetterforyou.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.